All right, listeners, get ready. We're about to take a deep dive into a stack of legal documents we got. They're all about the wild ride of corporate insolvency. And trust me, this case has more twists and turns than...
Then a pretzel. I was going to say a
Yeah,
pretzel.
that works too. But seriously, these documents are about a company called Unitech Machines Limited. And their journey through this whole process, it's fascinating.
Totally. I
Yeah.
mean, it really highlights the ins and outs of how this whole system, the one designed to help struggling companies either get back on track or, if it comes to it, have a fair wind down how it all actually works in the real world.
Right, right. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's set the scene a bit. What does Unitech Machines actually do?
So, based on these documents, it looks like they're in the business of making auto parts and accessories. They operate out of, let's see, Devika Tower in Nehru Place, New Delhi.
Oh, okay, so right in the heart of the action there.
Yeah, prime business district.
Now, for our listeners who might not be as familiar with the whole corporate lingo, can you break down exactly what we mean by Corporate Insolvency Resolution Process, or CIRP for short?
Sure. Picture this. You have a company, like our friends at Unitech Machines, facing some serious financial difficulties. Things aren't looking too good. CIRP, this process here in India, under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of 2016, well, it's kind of like a safety net. It's a chance for the company to try to get back on solid ground, to restructure, or, if things are really bad, to wind down everything in a way that's fair to everyone involved, the creditors, employees, the whole 9 yards.
So it's about finding the best way forward, whether that's keeping the company alive or making sure things end fairly.
Exactly. A structured approach to a tough situation.
Gotcha. Okay, so with Unitech Machines, how did they get to this point? What kicked off this whole CRP journey for them?
So it all starts back in March 2019. We see that Corporation Bank, one of Unitech's financial creditors, filed an application. They went to the National Company Law Tribunal, the NCLT, under Section 7 of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code.
Section 7, that's a big one, right?
Definitely. This section is the way a financial creditor can say, hey, this company owes us money and they can't pay up, so we need the NCLT to step in.
So that's when the clock really starts ticking.
Absolutely. Once the NCLT admits that application, the CRRP process officially begins, and there's a strict timeline that everyone has to stick to.
Gotcha. So Corporation Bank filing that Section 7 application, that was the turning point for Unitech.
It set everything in motion, and believe me, from there, things get very interesting.
All right, you've definitely piqued my interest. What happens next?
Well, after the CRAP begins, the first major step is appointing an Interim Resolution Professional, or an IRP. Think of the IRP as like a temporary CEO, someone brought in to manage the company during this whole process.
Okay, so who got the nod for Unitech Machines?
Our documents tell us it was a Mr. Vivek Raheja. He's going to be a key figure in all of this. Mr. Raheja's job was to look at the company's financial situation, see how bad things really were, collect claims from the creditors, and then, the big one, find a way to rescue Unitech, or, if that wasn't possible, get ready for liquidation.
It sounds like a lot of pressure on Mr. Raheja's shoulders, and especially with those tight deadlines you mentioned. How long did he have to try and make things happen?
The initial deadline for wrapping up the whole CRP for Unitech was October 2021. So not a whole lot of time, really.
October 2021. Okay, got it. So we've got our main player, Mr. Raheja, a ticking clock, and a company in a tight spot. What's next?
Well, this is where a potential savior enters the picture. A company called, let's see, MPS Ankit International. They come in as a potential rescuer, hoping to acquire Unitech and turn its fortunes around.
Okay, so Ankit International is like our knight in shining armor here.
Well, they're trying to be, but it's not always that simple. Ankit International, they submitted their plan, their proposal for taking over, but there's a twist.
A twist. All right, you've got my attention. Tell me more.
So Ankit International submitted their plan in November of 2019. And the Committee of Creditors, the COBIG, they weren't sold.
Hold on, who's this committee of creditors now? What's their role?
Right, good question. Think of the COKI as like the board of directors for this whole CRRP. They're the ones calling the shots. In this case, the COKI is made up of Unitech Machines financial creditors, so the banks and financial institutions that Unitech owed money to. Their job is to review the resolution plans and decide the company's fate.
So they have the power to either approve a rescue plan or say, nope, sorry, time to liquidate.
Pretty much. And with Ankit International's initial plan, they said nope. They deemed it unviable, meaning they didn't think it had a real chance of working out. So they decided to go ahead with liquidating Unitech Machines.
Oh, so that's it. Game over for Unitech.
Well, not so fast. Remember those twists and turns I mentioned? Ankit International wasn't ready to give up that easily. They appealed the Kolkhi's decision, taking it to the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, the NCLAT.
Okay, so the NCLT, that's a higher court, right? They can overrule the NCLT's decisions.
That's right. And in a surprising turn of events, the NCLAT actually agreed to put a hold on the liquidation process, giving Ankit International another chance to come up with a revised plan, a better plan.
Wow, so it's not over till it's over, right? So liquidation is on hold, and Ankit International gets a second shot. What did this comeback plan look like?
This is where it gets interesting. Ankit International came back with a revised plan, and it was a bit different than their first one. This time, they proposed a total financial outlay of Rs, 67.35 crore, to be paid out in installments over 24 months.
Ours, 67.35 crore. Wow, that's a hefty chunk of change. What were they planning to do with all that money?
So their plan had a few key parts. They were going to, of course, cover the costs of the CRP process itself. But the biggest chunk, around Rs 57.50 crore, was set aside to settle the claims of Unitech Machines financial creditors, the ones we talked about.
Makes sense, pay off the debts. So far, so good, but you said this plan was unique. What else did they have up their sleeve?
The really interesting part, Ankit International proposed an additional investment of Rs 5 crore into Unitech Machines. This was for capital expenditure, or CapEx.
CapEx. So not just paying off the old debts, but actually putting money into the company's future.
Exactly. They saw potential in Unitech Machines, and they were willing to put their money where their mouth was, try to make them competitive again.
That's a pretty bold move. Shows they really believed in their plan.
Right. And there's one more detail that made this plan stand out. Ankit International offered bank guarantee protection to some of the financial creditors, particularly those who voted yes on their plan.
Bank guarantee protection? What's that? Some kind of insurance for the banks?
Basically, yeah. It's a way to give the bank some peace of mind, reassure them that they're protected, even if Unitech Machines struggles down the line.
Okay, so Ankit International put together this whole plan, paying off debts, investing in the future, even offering these guarantees. How did the COSI react? Did they manage to win them over?
Well, it wasn't a unanimous decision. Corporation Bank, Bank of India, Karnataka Bank, and Nomi Bozai, they all voted yes. But State Bank of India, Standard Chartered Bank, and DIV Realtors, they either voted against it or abstained.
Oh, wow. So a mixed bag of opinions then.
Yeah, but they still managed to get the required majority for the plan to go through.
So Ankit International cleared that hurdle. They got the green light.
They did. But remember what I said about this case being full of twists? Getting the COSI's approval didn't mean it was smooth sailing from there. Not even close.
Uh-oh. Here we go again. What other challenges popped up?
Well, for starters, there were objections and delays from various parties. The Excise and Taxation Officer, for one, and the CGST Department, they both filed applications to try and get their claims against Unitech Machines included in the resolution process.
Ah, so more creditors wanting their share of the pie. That makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, but the issue was the timing. These claims, they came in after the deadline for submitting claims had already passed.
Oops, missed the deadline.
Pretty much. The CRP, it runs on a very tight schedule. And there's this concept of deemed knowledge, which basically means that once a public announcement has been made about the CRP, everyone is assumed to be aware of it and all the deadlines, whether they actually saw the announcement or not.
Deemed knowledge. So no excuse for being late to the party, huh?
Not really, no. And this is a really important thing for anyone involved in these kinds of proceedings. Those deadlines are serious business. If you miss your window to submit a claim, you could lose your chance to get that money back.
That's rough. So what about the Excise and Taxation Officer and the CGST Department? Were their late claims ultimately accepted?
So this is where the NCLAT and even the Supreme Court come into play. There were several judgments issued that basically upheld this whole deemed knowledge thing and emphasized that the court shouldn't interfere with the COSI's decisions unless absolutely necessary.
So the courts basically said, hey, the COSI made a decision based on the info they had, and we're going to respect that.
Basically, yeah. They recognized that the CRP process needs to be efficient and timely, and they weren't going to let these late claims derail the whole resolution plan, especially not after the COSI had already given their approval.
Makes sense. So Ankit International dodged a bullet there. But something tells me there are even more hurdles ahead.
You'd be right. This case, it seems to have been a magnet for objections. We have records of applications from all sorts of entities, each with their own reasons for opposing the plan or wanting something changed.
Like what kind of objections were they raising?
Well, for example, there was MSSJC Flounder Asset Reconstruction Private Limited. They weren't satisfied with how their claims were being treated under the resolution plan and appealed to the NCLT about it.
Trying to get a better deal for themselves.
Right. But in the end, their application was dismissed.
Another one bites the dust. I'm sensing a theme here.
Definitely. Throughout this whole case, you see this constant balancing act. You have to try to rescue a struggling company, but you also have to make sure it's fair to all the creditors, all the people who are owed money. The courts, they were very hesitant to interfere with the COSI's judgment calls unless it was super clear that they had made a mistake or were being unfair.
So it's like the courts were saying, let the COSI do their job.
Within the bounds of the law, of course. But yeah, they recognize that the Gadawashi has a lot of expertise and shouldn't be second-guessed at every turn.
So after all these delays, after all these legal battles, what happened? Did Ankit International actually end up taking over Unitech Machines? So after all that legal drama, did Ankit International finally get to step in and put their plan into action? Did they get to take over Unitech Machines?
They did. Yeah, for all those challenges, all those roadblocks, Ankit International's plan finally got the official thumbs up. The NCLT approved it in September 2024.
September 2024? Wow, that's almost 3 years past that initial deadline of October 2021. That's quite a journey.
It really shows you how, even though the CRP is supposed to be this quick process, it's also really thorough. They got to make sure everything's done by the book.
Right. So it's a happy ending then. Unitech Machines gets saved from being liquidated, and Ankit International gets to try and turn things around.
That's the gist of it, yeah. And when the NCLT issued its final judgment, they actually highlighted a few really important points. They talked about the importance of what they called the commercial wisdom of the COSI.
Commercial wisdom. So like they trusted the COSI to make the right call, the best decision for the company and all the creditors.
Exactly. The courts recognized that the COSI was in the best position to look at that resolution plan, look at all the details, and decide if it was actually going to work.
Interesting. So basically a win for Ankit International, a win for Unitech Machines, and maybe even a win for the CRP process as a whole, right? It shows it can actually work the way it's supposed to.
For sure. It proves that the CRP can achieve its goals, rescuing a viable business, or making sure things end fairly.
Totally. But hold on a second, there's more to it, right? Didn't Ankit International also ask for some things, some waivers as part of their plan?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I almost forgot about that. They asked for some help, things like tax breaks and some regulatory relief, stuff to make their plan even stronger.
Right. Those concessions we talked about earlier.
Yes, exactly. And the NCLT actually addressed that in their final judgment. Yeah. They told Ankit International, look, you need to go to the right authorities, the ones who handle those specific things, and formally ask them for those waivers.
So the NCLT wasn't just going to hand them over.
Nope. They said, hey, there's a process for these things. You got to follow the rules.
Interesting. Even after the main plan was approved, there was still more to do, more hoops to jump through.
Yep. That's how it goes sometimes. The CRP process, it's complex. There are a lot of moving parts. It's not always as simple as getting a yes or a no.
Makes sense. So as we start to wrap up here, what would you say are the biggest takeaways from this whole Unitech Machines case? What did we learn?
Well, for me, a few things really stand out. First, we saw how crucial those CRP deadlines are. And that whole deemed knowledge thing is not just a legal term. It can have real consequences.
Absolutely. Creditors out there, listen up. You got to stay on top of these deadlines, miss them, and you might be out of luck.
Exactly. The second thing, I think, is how important the COSI is in all of this. They have a lot of power, they make the big decisions, and the courts generally respect that.
So, creditors, make your voices heard in those COSI proceedings. That's where the real action is.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And finally, this case, it really shows us the balancing act the syrup tries to achieve. It's not just about getting money back, it's about trying to find a way to save a company, if possible, while still being fair to everyone who's owed something.
Really great points. We've covered a lot today, but before we wrap up, anything else that really stuck with you from this case?
What's really got me thinking is this. How does this whole deemed knowledge idea work in the real world? We assume everyone knows everything, but is that really how it works? Especially when we're talking about something as important as someone's livelihood. Shouldn't we be doing more to make sure people actually know what's going on, know their rights, know the deadlines?
Wow, that's a really good question. Yeah, it really makes you wonder about the fairness of it all, What if someone misses out just because they didn't get the memo, so to speak?
Right. It definitely raises some questions about how effective this deemed knowledge thing really is, especially in this day and age when information overload is a real thing.
Totally. But hey, at least for Unitech machines, it seems like things worked out all right in the end.
Yeah, I think so. Their case, it really shows how the CRP can give a struggling business a fighting chance. It's not just about shutting things down, it's about finding solutions.
Absolutely. Well, listeners, I think it's safe to say we've all gotten a crash course in corporate insolvency today, thanks to this deep dive into Unitech machines.
I'd say so. It's been quite a ride, hasn't it? Twists, turns, legal battles, a lot to unpack.
For sure. And a big thanks to our listener who sent in this incredible set of documents. We couldn't have done it without you.
Definitely. Always a pleasure to geek out on this stuff with you.
Always a good time. And listeners, until next time, stay curious, keep those legal documents coming, and remember, dive deep.